Today, we're going to dive into something pretty different. It's a structured forecast that looks at one of the biggest mysteries out there, UAPs. But this isn't about speculation or conspiracy theories. Instead, it's a deep analysis that treats the decades of secrecy around this topic like a system that's under a whole lot of pressure. And it predicts that system is about to hit a major turning point on a very specific timeline. So, that brings us to the big question. Can you actually predict the future of something as secretive as UAP transparency? I mean, for generations, the whole subject has been locked down. But the system that's kept that lock in place, it's getting shaky, unstable. This analysis suggests that we can actually forecast when it might break, not based on opinions, but by looking at the very structure that's holding it all together.
So how in the world is that possible? Well, the whole forecast is built on a fascinating idea that huge, complex changes, we're talking everything from how galaxies form to how human societies evolve, they all tend to follow a repeating universal pattern. And if you can understand that pattern, you can get a pretty good idea of what's coming next.
The specific tool used to do all this is called Triune Harmonic Dynamics, or you can just call it THD. It's a framework that was developed by a researcher and author named Kevin L. Brown, and he designed it specifically to map out and predict how complex systems change over time. Okay, so what is THD? At its heart, it's a theory that says all change happens in a universal three-phase pattern. The framework uses the numbers 3, 6, and 9 as a kind of map for this cycle. It always starts with something new emerging, then it goes through a period of being tested and challenged, and finally it integrates into a new, more stable reality. And this isn't just some philosophical concept. It's actually grounded in mathematics. Now, don't worry, you don't need to solve this equation. The key thing to see here is that this formula exists. It shows that the THD framework is trying to model these phases of change in a structured, measurable way. It's about turning a big idea into a practical tool for analysis. Let's break that cycle down so it's super simple. It's got 3 steps. Number 1 is emergence. That's when a new idea or a new state of being is born. Number 2 is contrast. That's when the new thing gets challenged and tested by opposing forces. And finally, number 3 is integration, when it all settles into a new, higher level of order. And then that whole cycle just starts all over again. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what does this abstract theory have to do with UAP secrecy? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The analysis takes this 3-phase framework and applies it directly to the entire history of UAP information control. It uses it to diagnose where we are right now and to forecast where we're going next. And here's what that looks like. You can map the entire history onto this cycle. From about 1947 all the way to 2020, you had the base phase, a pretty stable system of official secrecy. But starting in 2021 and running through early 2026, we entered the pressure phase. That's where all the new sensor data and leaks start to make things really unstable. The forecast then points to late 2026 through 2027 as the final integration phase, where the whole system finally resolves into a new state of, well, transparency. So, here's the most important part of this whole analysis. According to the model, we are sitting right here, right now, at the absolute peak of that critical pressure phase. The system is stretched to its breaking point, and it's basically primed for a massive shift. And this pressure isn't just a feeling. The model actually measures it with something called a structural pressure index. You can see factors like sensor saturation, that's the explosion of commercial satellites and new sensors everywhere, and signal divergence, which we'll get to in a second. They're scored incredibly high. With a total score of 32 out of 40, the model is basically screaming that the system is getting close to a breaking point. Let's zoom in on that signal divergence because it is critical. The official signal, the public story, says one thing, but the structural signal, what's actually happening behind the scenes, like trillions in hidden spending and a massive push for new sensor tech, that tells a completely different story. And according to this framework, whenever what is said and what is done are this far apart, a system just can't stay stable for long. So if the pressure is that high, where does it lead? Well, the forecast doesn't predict one single dramatic event. Instead, it lays out a very specific 2-stage transition that's expected to unfold over a clearly defined period of time. Here are the 2 predicted steps. Stage 1 is called the rupture, and it's forecast for 2026. The model describes it as a major data leak. Think high-res video or sensor data of non-human tech coming not from the government, but from the private space industry. That's followed by stage 2 in 2027, called integration. This is where a detectability threshold is crossed, and transparency just becomes the new reality. The model also puts some numbers on this. It assigns probabilities to each phase. And you can see that while the pressure's been building for a while, the analysis suggests the highest probability for a major event, a full 40%, is clustered right there in that final integration window in 2027. That comes right after a pretty significant 35% probability for that initial data leak in 2026.
Okay, so now let's get to the most concrete part of this whole thing, the specific data points and the exact timelines that we can all watch for.
And this is where the forecast gets incredibly specific. It actually points to a peak probability window for that stage 1 data rupture between May 15th and June 12th, 2026. And for stage 2, that final threshold moment, it points to an even tighter window between October 29th and November 5th, 2027.
So what should we be looking for as these dates get closer? The analysis gives us specific, real-world things to watch. For instance, sudden technical glitches on commercial satellites could be a sign of a behind-the-scenes data struggle. Whistleblowers going from anonymous sources to full public testimony, that would show a huge loss of control. And a string of high-level resignations at major defense contractors, that could be a sign that people on the inside know something big is about to break. These are the telltale signs. Now, this is absolutely crucial. Any good forecast has to tell you not just what to look for if it's right, but also how you would know if it's wrong. This is what separates a scientific model from just a prophecy. It has to be falsifiable. And here are the exact conditions that would prove this forecast wrong. For instance, if strict new censorship rules are successfully slapped onto commercial satellite data, or if the government's official UAP office, ARO, somehow manages to contain all this new data without any leaks, or if that pressure score we saw earlier drops way down, that would mean the system has stabilized, and this prediction is off the table. This quote from the source material really just sums up the whole driving force behind the forecast. The energy, the money, the effort it takes to maintain the old system of secrecy, it's just gotten too big. So big, in fact, that the analysis suggests a change isn't just possible, it's becoming inevitable. So there you have it. The forecast is officially on the clock. We've got clear dates, observable signs to watch for, and a set of conditions that could prove it all wrong. And it really leaves us with a huge question. For just a minute, forget about whether you think it will happen or not. Just ask yourself, what are the implications for everything? Our technology, our society, our place in the universe? What happens if it's right?
And finally, we want to be very clear that this entire analysis, from the core theory of Triune Harmonic Dynamics all the way to this specific UAP forecast, was developed by the researcher, inventor, and author Kevin L. Brown.